The bedroom had become a battleground of silence. For 8 months, my wife Sarah and I had been living like polite strangers sharing a house. Every attempt I made at physical intimacy was met with excuses, headaches, exhaustion, stress from work. I'd tried everything. Romantic dinners, weekend getaways, couples therapy suggestions. Nothing worked. I'm Mark, and I've been married to Sarah for 6 years. We met in college, fell in love over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza, and built what I thought was an unshakable foundation. She was a pediatric nurse with a heart of gold, and I was a software engineer who loved making her laugh. We talked about having children someday, but we wanted to wait until we were financially stable. Those 8 months felt like slow torture. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Sarah would be turned away from me, the gap between us in bed feeling like an ocean. During the day, she was distant but not unkind. She'd ask about my work, discuss household matters, even smile occasionally. But there was a wall between us that I couldn't penetrate. I started noticing other things too. She was on her phone constantly, tilting the screen away when I walked by. She started working late shifts more frequently, though when I called the hospital to bring her dinner once, they said she'd left an hour earlier. She bought new lingerie. I found the receipt, but I never saw her wear it. She started going to the gym, getting her hair done more often, wearing perfume on days she said she was just running errands. The signs were all there, screaming at me like neon lights in the darkness. My wife was having an affair. I wanted to confront her. God, how I wanted to. But something held me back. Maybe it was cowardice, or maybe it was the desperate hope that I was wrong. I hired a private investigator instead. A middle-aged woman named Patricia who came highly recommended. The retainer nearly emptied my personal savings account, but I needed to know the truth. 3 weeks later, Patricia handed me a manila envelope filled with photographs and reports. My hands shook as I looked through them. There was Sarah, meeting a man at coffee shops, walking with him in the park, entering a hotel together. The man was tall, well-dressed, older than both of us, maybe in his late 40s. They looked comfortable together, familiar. The dates and timestamps documented everything I needed to know. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I was still processing, still trying to figure out what to do with my marriage, my life, everything I thought I knew. I moved the envelope to my office safe and tried to act normal, though normal had become a foreign concept in our house. Then, exactly 3 weeks after I received Patricia's report, everything changed. I came home from work on a Tuesday evening to find candles lit throughout the house. Soft music played in the background, the jazz playlist we used to listen to when we first dated. The smell of my favorite meal, her homemade lasagna, wafted from the kitchen. Sarah appeared in the doorway wearing a dress I hadn't seen in years, her hair down, makeup perfect. "Welcome home," she said, her voice soft and warm in a way it hadn't been in months. I stood frozen in the doorway, my briefcase still in my hand. "What's all this?" "I've been terrible to you," she said, walking toward me. "I've been dealing with some things, working through some personal issues, and I shut you out. That wasn't fair." She took my briefcase and set it down, then wrapped her arms around my neck. "I want to fix us, Mark. I want to get back what we had." That night, she initiated intimacy for the first time in 8 months. My body responded even as my mind screamed warnings. Afterward, as we lay in the darkness, she whispered against my shoulder, "I think we're ready now." "Ready for what?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. "A baby," she said. "Let's start trying for a baby." My blood ran cold. The photographs from Patricia's envelope flashed through my mind. Sarah and that man, looking at each other with unmistakable intimacy. The timeline suddenly made horrible sense. She wasn't trying to fix our marriage. She was trying to trap me, to make me believe any child she was carrying was mine. I lay awake the entire night, my wife's head on my chest, planning my next move. I wouldn't confront her yet. I would play along, pretend everything was fine. But I was already making a mental note to contact Patricia again, to keep documenting everything. And when the baby came, because I was certain now that a baby was already on the way, I would be ready with a DNA test. I just had to survive the lie until then. The following weeks were the most surreal of my life. Sarah transformed overnight from the cold, distant woman I'd been living with into an approximation of the wife I'd fallen in love with. She cooked breakfast before work, sent me flirty texts during the day, and greeted me with kisses when I came home. To anyone on the outside, we looked like newlyweds rekindling their passion. But I knew better. Every smile felt calculated, every touch strategic. I played my part perfectly, responding to her affection while documenting everything in a private journal I kept locked in my desk at work. Dates, times, behaviors, I recorded it all, building my case for the inevitable divorce. 2 weeks after her sudden transformation, Sarah announced she was pregnant. Already, I said, trying to inject surprise into my voice while my heart sank. That's wonderful, honey. She threw her arms around me, tears streaming down her face. I know it happened so fast. The doctor says I'm about 6 weeks along. Can you believe it? We're going to be parents. 6 weeks. The math worked perfectly for her narrative, right after our first night together following the 8-month dry spell. But I knew the truth. She'd gotten pregnant by her lover and was now trying to pass the child off as mine. I held her while she cried happy tears, my own eyes dry and my heart hardening into something I barely recognized. I thought of that man in the photographs, wondered if he knew about the baby, wondered what lies Sarah had told him about me. Patricia called me the next day. I took the call from my car during lunch, parked in the far corner of my office parking lot where no one could overhear. I've been continuing surveillance as you requested, she said. The meetings have stopped. As of 2 weeks ago, your wife hasn't met with the individual again. 2 weeks. Right when Sarah had staged her romantic reunion with me. Can you dig deeper into who he is? I asked. I need to know everything. Already on it. I'll have a full report by next week. Sarah threw herself into pregnancy with enthusiastic determination. She bought books about fetal development, started taking prenatal vitamins, and scheduled her first prenatal appointment. She asked me to come with her, her eyes so hopeful that I couldn't refuse without arousing suspicion. The ultrasound room was dark except for the monitor's glow. Sarah squeezed my hand as the technician moved the wand over her belly. When the rapid heartbeat filled the room, a sound like galloping horses, Sarah started crying again. There's your baby, the technician said, pointing to a tiny flickering shape on the screen. Your baby, she'd said. Not our baby. The distinction felt meaningful, even though I knew it wasn't intended that way. I stared at that tiny form and felt an confusing mixture of anger and unexpected protectiveness. Whatever the truth of this child's parentage, it was innocent in all this. The doctor confirmed Sarah was indeed 6 weeks pregnant, though she mentioned the dating could be off by a week or so in either direction. Sarah didn't seem concerned by this caveat, but I filed it away as another piece of evidence. That night, Sarah made her favorite comfort food, chicken pot pie, and we sat at the dinner table like a normal couple. She talked excitedly about baby names, nursery colors, whether we should find out the gender or be surprised. I made appropriate responses while internally calculating how long I'd have to maintain this charade. Mark, Sarah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. You seem distant. Are you okay? Are you happy about the baby? I looked at her across the table. This woman I'd loved for 6 years. This stranger who was lying to me with every breath. I'm overwhelmed, I said, which was the most honest thing I told her in weeks. It's a big change. She reached across and took my hand. I know I haven't been the best wife lately. I'm going to make it up to you, I promise. This baby is going to make everything right again. The irony of her statement would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. Patricia's detailed report arrived the following week. I read it in my car before work, my coffee growing cold in the cup holder. The man's name was Dr. Richard Chun, a renowned oncologist at the hospital where Sarah worked. 47 years old, divorced, no children. He'd been at the hospital for 3 years, specializing in pediatric oncology. He had an impeccable reputation, numerous published papers, and was well respected in his field. But it was the final paragraph that made my blood run cold. Subject research reveals Dr. Chan recently took a leave of absence from the hospital for medical reasons. According to hospital sources, he is undergoing treatment for stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Prognosis is poor. Subject has approximately 6 months to live, possibly less. I read that paragraph 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Sarah's lover was dying. That's why the meetings had stopped. That's why Sarah had suddenly come back to me. He was dying, and she needed to secure her future and the baby's future. And I was the convenient husband who could provide both. The calculation of it all made me physically ill. I barely made it out of my car before I vomited in the bushes beside the parking lot. For the next month, I lived in a fog of barely suppressed rage and grief. Grief for my marriage, for the trust that had been shattered, for the future I'd envisioned with Sarah. I went through the motions, attending prenatal appointments, helping Sarah choose a crib, painting what would become the nursery a soft yellow because we'd decided to be surprised about the gender. At night, I lay awake planning for the DNA test. I researched laboratories, learned about non-invasive prenatal paternity testing that could be done with just a blood sample from Sarah. I could have it done without her knowledge, get the results, and then decide my next move. But something kept stopping me. Maybe it was the image of that tiny heartbeat on the ultrasound. Maybe it was the small part of me that still hoped, against all evidence, that I was wrong. Sarah bloomed in her second trimester. Her skin glowed, her mood lifted, and she seemed genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in over a year. Sometimes I'd catch her with her hand on her growing belly, a soft smile on her face, and she looked so much like the woman I'd married that my heart would ache. We were folding baby clothes together one Saturday afternoon, gifts from her mother, when Sarah suddenly grabbed my hand and placed it on her stomach. "Feel that?" she whispered. "The baby's kicking." I felt it, a gentle flutter against my palm, like a butterfly trapped beneath her skin. And despite everything, despite all the lies and betrayal, tears sprang to my eyes. "That's our baby," Sarah said softly. "Our little miracle." I nodded, unable to speak, the word "our" echoing in my head like an accusation. Month 4 of Sarah's pregnancy arrived with autumn's first cold snap. The nursery was nearly complete, the crib assembled, drawers filled with tiny clothes. To the outside world, we were the picture of expectant parents preparing for their first child. Inside, I was drowning in the weight of secrets and lies. I decided to move forward with the prenatal DNA test. I couldn't wait until after the birth. I needed to know the truth now, needed to plan my next steps. I scheduled an appointment at a private laboratory 3 towns over, somewhere Sarah would never accidentally discover. The night before my appointment, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the doorway of the nursery at 2 in the morning, looking at the mobile hanging over the crib, little elephants and giraffes rotating slowly in the draft from the heating vent. I'd hung it myself just days before, Sarah directing me from where she sat in the rocking chair, one hand on her belly, smiling. "Can't sleep either?" I jumped. Sarah stood behind me in her nightgown, her belly now unmistakably round. "Just thinking," I said. She came to stand beside me, and we both stared into the room we'd created together. "Mark, I need to tell you something." My heart stopped. Was she finally going to confess? Part of me almost wanted her to, just to end this exhausting pretense. "The distance between us before," she continued softly. "It wasn't about you. It was never about you. I was dealing with something at work, something that really affected me, and I didn't handle it well. I shut down instead of reaching out to you." "What happened at work?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. She was quiet for a long moment. "A patient, a little boy I'd been caring for. He died, and it broke something in me. I couldn't be around anyone. I couldn't be touched or held because I just felt so numb inside." It was plausible. Sarah had always taken her work seriously, had cried over losing patients before. But the timing was too convenient, and she still hadn't explained the man in the photographs, the hotel visits, the lies about working late. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I should have," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for shutting you out." We stood there in silence, and I wondered if any part of what she'd said was true. or if it was just another layer of deception. The next morning, I told Sarah I had a work meeting and drove to the laboratory. The geneticist who met with me was professional and discreet. She explained I'd need a blood sample from Sarah, just a simple vial, and then they could extract fetal DNA from it and compare it to mine. The results take about 10 days, she said. And I have to be clear, collecting this sample without your wife's knowledge is legally complicated. I need you to sign several documents acknowledging the ethical considerations. I signed everything, my hands steady despite my racing heart. She gave me a kit for collecting the blood sample and instructions for storing it properly until I could bring it in. Many people in your situation wait until after the birth, she said gently. Are you sure you want to know now? I need to know, I said. Getting the blood sample proved easier than I'd expected. Sarah had regular prenatal checkups, and at her next appointment they drew blood for routine testing. I'd become friendly with the nurse over the past months, always chatting while Sarah got her vitals checked. Could I get an extra vial? I asked when Sarah was in the bathroom. My wife mentioned wanting to donate to a blood drive but wasn't sure about her blood type. I thought if we had a recent sample. The lie came so easily it scared me. The nurse, young and friendly, didn't question it. She prepared an extra vial and handed it to me with a smile. That afternoon I delivered it to the laboratory. 10 days until I knew the truth. 10 days until I could stop pretending. Sarah's mother came to visit that week, excited about her first grandchild. I watched them together, shopping for baby items, folding clothes, laughing over parenting books, and felt like an intruder in my own life. Sarah's mother kept saying how happy she was that Sarah was back to her old self, and how wonderful it was that we were starting our family. If only she knew the truth. But then, did I even know the truth? I had photographs and suspicions, but what if I was wrong? What if there was an explanation I hadn't considered? The doubt crept in during quiet moments, making me question everything. I went back through Patricia's reports, looking for anything I might have missed. The photographs were damning but not explicit. Yes, Sarah and Dr. Chun had met multiple times, had entered a hotel together, but I didn't have proof of what happened inside. Maybe they really were just colleagues. Maybe the patient Sarah mentioned, the one who died, was Dr. Chen's patient, and they'd bonded over the grief of losing a child. I was grasping at straws and I knew it. On day 8 of waiting for the results, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the hospital where Sarah worked, parking across the street with a baseball cap pulled low. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to see, but I needed to do something. I watched the entrance for 2 hours. Nurses and doctors came and went, their scrubs marking them as clearly as uniforms. I saw Sarah come out for her lunch break, sitting on a bench outside with another nurse, both of them laughing at something on a phone. Then I saw him, Dr. Richard Chen. Even from a distance, I recognized him from Patricia's photographs. He walked slowly, carefully, one hand braced against the building's wall. He looked thinner than in the photos, his skin pale, his movements deliberate. He looked like what he was, a dying man. I watched as Sarah noticed him. Her smile faded instantly. She said something to her colleague and stood, walking toward Dr. Chun. They didn't touch, didn't embrace, but I could see them talking, could see the concern on Sarah's face and the resignation on his. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then Dr. Chun turned and walked back inside, and Sarah returned to her bench. But she didn't sit down. She stood there, one hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face. I sat in my car, watching my wife cry over another man, and felt my last thread of hope snap. The DNA results arrived via secure email on day 10, exactly as promised. I was at work when the notification came through. My hands shook so badly I could barely click the link to access the report. I read it 3 times before the words finally penetrated. Probability of paternity 0%. The tested man cannot be the biological father of the tested fetus. There it was. Scientific proof of what I'd suspected all along. The baby Sarah was carrying wasn't mine. I sat at my desk, staring at those words, waiting to feel something. Anger, betrayal, vindication, anything. Instead, I just felt empty. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Doctor's appointment moved to 4 p.m. today instead of tomorrow. Can you still make it? We get to find out the gender. Red heart. I stared at that heart emoji for a long time. Then I typed back, I'll be there. Because despite everything, despite the lies and the betrayal and the DNA test results burning on my screen, I needed to see this through to the end. I needed to understand why. I needed to hear the truth from Sarah's own lips, even if I had to force it out of her. The confrontation was coming. But first, I had one more appointment to make, with Dr. Richard Chun himself. I called the hospital's oncology department the next morning, asking to speak with Dr. Chun. His secretary informed me he was on medical leave but could schedule a consultation when he returned. I explained I wasn't a patient. I was the husband of one of his colleagues and needed to discuss an urgent personal matter. There was a long pause. Then, Dr. Chun is doing limited consults from home. If it's truly urgent, I can reach out to him. 2 hours later, my phone rang from an unknown number. This is Richard Chun, said a voice that sounded tired and strained. My secretary said you needed to speak with me urgently. I assume this is about Sarah. My breath caught. He knew exactly who I was. Yes, I managed. We need to talk. I agree, he said. Can you come to my home this afternoon? I'll text you the address. The house was in an upscale neighborhood, a beautiful colonial with a well-maintained garden showing the first signs of autumn decay. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, gathering courage, before finally walking to the door. Dr. Chun answered on the first knock. Up close, the ravages of his illness were even more apparent. His skin had a grayish tinge, his eyes were sunken, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone in constant pain. But his gaze was sharp and intelligent. Mr. Morrison, he said, please come in. His living room was filled with medical journals and books. A hospital bed had been set up near the windows, overlooking the garden. He gestured to a chair and carefully lowered himself onto the sofa across from me. I've been expecting this conversation, he said, though I'm surprised it took this long. You know about the baby, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He looked at me steadily. And I assume you've figured out it's mine. Hearing him say it out loud, so calmly, so directly, sent a wave of anger through me. How long? I demanded. How long were you sleeping with my wife? For months, he said. May through August. It ended when I got my diagnosis. The same 4 months Sarah had been cold and distant with me. The same months I'd been trying desperately to save our marriage while she'd been in another man's bed. Why? The word came out broken. Why did you do this? Why did Sarah do this? Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment. His fingers steepled together. It's complicated, Mr. Morrison, but you deserve the truth, and frankly, I don't have time left for complicated lies. He paused, seeming to gather his strength. Sarah and I met 3 years ago when she transferred to pediatric oncology. We worked together frequently. I'm one of the senior doctors in that department. We became friends, nothing more. We were both in relationships. She with you, me with my ex-wife before the divorce. He shifted, wincing slightly. Last spring, we lost a patient. Tommy Chin, no relation to me, though the boy used to joke about it. He was 8 years old, one of the brightest kids I've ever known. Brain cancer, inoperable. Sarah had been his primary nurse for 2 years. She adored him and he adored her. We both fought so hard to save him. I watched emotions flicker across his face. Grief, pain, regret. When Tommy died, it destroyed something in both of us. We'd meet to talk about it, to process our grief together because no one else understood. Those meetings became more frequent. We leaned on each other. And then one night, we crossed a line we shouldn't have crossed. That's supposed to make me feel better? I said bitterly. You bonded over grief. So cheating on me was justified? No, he said firmly. Nothing justifies what we did to you. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm explaining what happened. He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. The affair lasted 4 months. Sarah was racked with guilt the entire time. She would cry afterward, say she was a terrible person, that she loved you and didn't know why she kept doing this. I think we were both using each other to avoid dealing with our pain. It was selfish and wrong. Then why didn't it stop? I demanded. It did, he said, opening his eyes. In late August, I started having symptoms. Severe pain, weight loss, jaundice. I got tested and they found it stage 4 pancreatic cancer already metastasized to my liver. I was given 6 to 12 months, probably closer to 6. His voice remained steady, but I could see the fear beneath the calm exterior. This was a man confronting his own mortality. I told Sarah I was sick and that we needed to end things immediately. She was devastated, but she agreed. She went back to you, Mr. Morrison. She chose you. And then 2 weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they formed was even more complicated than I'd imagined. She called me, panicking. Dr. Chun continued. She knew the baby was mine. You two hadn't been intimate in months at that point. She didn't know what to do. I told her to tell you the truth, but she was terrified of losing you. She wanted to believe she could make it work, make you believe the baby was yours. So she seduced me, I said bitterly, pretended everything was fine, got me to sleep with her so the timeline would work. Yes, he said quietly, and I told her it was wrong. I told her you deserved the truth. But Sarah, she's not a bad person, Mr. Morrison. She's a person who made terrible choices while drowning in grief and fear. She loves you. Maybe not the way you want to be loved. Maybe not in a way that excuses what she did. But she does love you. She has a funny way of showing it, I said. Dr. Chun reached for a glass of water on the side table, his hand shaking slightly. I've asked to see you today because I need to tell you something Sarah doesn't know. Something no one knows except my doctors. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with meaning. I have a genetic condition, Mr. Morrison. Lynch syndrome. It's a hereditary disorder that significantly increases the risk of certain cancers, including the one that's killing me. There's a 50% chance I passed it on to any biological children. The room seemed to tilt. You're saying? I'm saying that baby Sarah is carrying has a 50% chance of carrying the same genetic mutation that gave me cancer. A mutation that will put that child at significantly elevated risk for multiple types of cancer throughout their entire life. Horror washed over me. Does Sarah know? Not yet, he said. I only received the genetic testing results last week. I've been trying to figure out how to tell her. But you're here now, and you deserve to know the full truth of what you're dealing with. He pulled out a folder from beside the couch and handed it to me. This is all my medical information, including the genetic testing results. You'll want Sarah to get tested during the pregnancy to see if the baby inherited the mutation. If they did, there are protocols, early screening, preventive measures. It's not a death sentence, but it's something that will affect this child's entire life. I stared at the folder in my hands, feeling the weight of it. Not just the physical papers, but the implications. Why are you telling me this? Why not tell Sarah yourself? Because I'm dying, Mr. Morrison. In a few months, I'll be gone, and this baby will need a father. A real father, not just a biological sperm donor who had an affair with their mother. He looked at me with something that might have been hope. You have a choice to make. You can leave Sarah, divorce her, let her raise this child alone while dealing with potential genetic complications. That would be completely justified given what she did to you. He paused, his next words careful and deliberate. Or you can choose to be this child's father, not because of biology, but because every child deserves a father who will be there for them, who will love them, who will help them navigate whatever challenges they face. This baby didn't ask to be conceived the way they were. They didn't ask to potentially carry my genetic curse. But they're coming into the world regardless, and they're going to need someone. You're asking me to forgive her, I said. To just pretend none of this happened. No, he said firmly. I'm asking you to decide what kind of man you want to be. Forgiveness is between you and Sarah. That's not my place to negotiate. But this child is innocent in all of this. What happens to them shouldn't be determined by the mistakes Sarah and I made. We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, leaves fell from the trees in the garden, nature's own cycle of death and renewal playing out in real time. I need to think, I finally said, standing up. Dr. Chun nodded, remaining seated. That's fair. But Mr. Morrison, don't take too long. I don't have much time left, and there are medical decisions that need to be made about the baby screening. Whatever you decide about Sarah, please make sure that child gets tested for Lynch syndrome. I walked to the door, then turned back. Did you love her, Sarah? He considered the question carefully. I cared for her deeply, but love? Real love? No. We were two broken people seeking comfort in the worst possible way. Real love looks like what you've been doing. Showing up, trying to fix things, being present even when it hurts. That's something I never gave her. I left without another word, the folder of medical records under my arm, my mind reeling with everything I'd learned. The gender reveal appointment was in 2 hours. Sarah was expecting me there, expecting me to smile and celebrate regardless of whether we were having a boy or a girl. She had no idea I knew the truth. No idea I just spent the afternoon with her dying lover. No idea that the baby she was carrying might face a lifetime of elevated cancer risks. I sat in my car in Dr. Chen's driveway, staring at the folder in my hands, and made a decision. It was time to talk to Sarah. I didn't go to the gender reveal appointment. Instead, I texted Sarah that something urgent came up at work and I'd meet her at home afterward. She responded with a disappointed emoji and a photo from the doctor's office. An ultrasound image with a pink heart drawn in the corner. It's a girl, her message said. Our little girl. Can't wait to tell you everything. Red heart. Our little girl. The possessive pronoun felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I drove around for hours, the medical folder on the passenger seat like a witness to my turmoil. I thought about everything Dr. Chan had said, about Sarah's grief and fear, about the innocent child who might carry a genetic curse. I thought about the life I'd imagined and the reality I was living. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was dark. Every light in the house was on, warm and inviting. Through the window, I could see Sarah moving around the kitchen, probably making dinner, probably excited to share the news about our daughter. Not our daughter, his daughter. A daughter who might spend her life fighting the same disease that was killing her biological father. I sat in the car for 10 more minutes, gathering the courage for what came next. Then I grabbed the folder and went inside. Sarah was standing by the stove, stirring something that smelled like her grandmother's chili recipe. She turned when I entered, her face lighting up with a smile that almost made me lose my resolve. You're finally home. I have so much to tell you about the appointment. Mark, we're having a daughter. Can you believe it? A little girl. She crossed to me, trying to hug me, but I stepped back. Her smile faltered. Mark? What's wrong? We need to talk, I said. Sit down, Sarah. Something in my voice must have frightened her because the color drained from her face. She turned off the stove with shaking hands and sat at the kitchen table. I remained standing, the folder in my hands. I know about Richard Chun, I said. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah's face went from white to gray. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, protective. Mark, let me finish, I interrupted. I've known for months. I hired a private investigator. I have photographs of you two together. I know about the affair. I know the baby isn't mine, and I know about his cancer. Tears started streaming down her face, but I continued, unable to stop now that I'd started. I got a DNA test done, prenatal. I know for certain that I'm not the biological father. I went to see Richard today. He told me everything. About Tommy, about the grief, about how the affair started and ended. He told me about his Lynch syndrome. Sarah's head snapped up. His what? I dropped the folder on the table in front of her. Open it. Read it. Your daughter has a 50% chance of having inherited a genetic condition that significantly increases her risk for multiple types of cancer. Richard only found out last week. He asked me to make sure the baby gets tested. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the folder and began reading. I watched as comprehension dawned, followed by horror, followed by a grief so profound it was painful to witness. She read every page, tears dripping onto the medical reports. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, no. Not my baby. Please, not my baby." She looked up at me, her face destroyed by anguish. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant. I didn't know how." She couldn't finish, dissolving into sobs. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, exhausted. "Tell me why, Sarah. I need to understand why you did this. Why you lied to me. Why you tried to trap me into thinking this baby was mine." She wiped at her tears, trying to compose herself enough to speak. "Tommy," she finally said. "When Tommy died, something broke in me. He was this beautiful, bright little boy, and he suffered so much, and nothing we did could save him. I kept thinking about his mother, about watching her son die, and I couldn't bear it." She took a shuddering breath. "I shut down. I couldn't let you touch me because every time you did, all I could think about was loss and death and grief. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I was drowning, Mark, and I didn't know how to ask for help. So you turned to Richard," I said flatly. "He understood," she said. "He'd lost Tommy too, and we could talk about it without pretending to be okay. And then one night it happened, and it kept happening. I knew it was wrong. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. It was like I was watching someone else make these terrible decisions." She pressed her hands against her face. "When Richard got sick and ended things, I was relieved. I knew I needed to fix my marriage. Fix us. And then I found out I was pregnant, and I panicked. I'd already lost you emotionally. I could feel you pulling away after months of rejecting you. I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd leave me to deal with this alone. So you lied," I said. "You manipulated me, seduced me, made me believe the baby was mine." "Yes," she whispered. "And it was wrong. It was so wrong, and I knew it every single day. But I told myself I was protecting you, protecting us, protecting this baby. I told myself that if you believed she was yours, you'd love her, and we could be a family. I told myself a lot of lies to justify what I was doing." She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to stay. I know I destroyed everything we had. But Mark, this baby," her voice broke, "this baby might be sick. She might have Richard's condition. And I'm terrified. I'm so terrified, and I don't know how to do this alone." I sat there, looking at this woman I'd loved, this woman who had betrayed me in the worst way possible, this woman who was now facing the possibility of a child with significant medical challenges. I thought about Dr. Chen's words about what kind of man I wanted to be. "I'm not leaving," I heard myself say. Sarah's head jerked up, disbelief in her eyes. "What? I'm not leaving," I repeated, surprised by the certainty in my own voice. "But we need to establish some things right now. First, this baby gets tested immediately for Lynch syndrome. Second, you're going to therapy, individual therapy to deal with your grief and whatever made you capable of lying to me for months. Third, we're going to couples therapy if there's any chance of saving this marriage. And fourth," I paused, making sure she understood how serious I was, "you're going to tell your family the truth. Your mother, your father, everyone. No more lies." "Mark, I can't. My parents will. Those are my conditions," I said firmly. "You wanted me to be this child's father? Fine. But I won't do it based on deception. I won't have your family thinking everything is perfect when we're building on a foundation of lies. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to choose to be this little girl's father, then we do it with honesty from this point forward." Sarah stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll tell them. I'll do whatever it takes. And one more thing," I said, the hardest part of all. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah. I don't know if I can ever trust you again or love you the way I used to. I'm staying for that little girl who didn't ask to be born into this mess. I'm staying because every child deserves a father who will be there for them. But us? Our marriage? I don't know if that can be saved. We're going to try. But I need you to understand that choosing to stay doesn't mean everything is okay." "I understand," she said, tears flowing freely again. Thank you. Thank you for staying, for giving her a chance. For she couldn't continue. The following weeks were the hardest of my life. Sarah had genetic counseling and testing. We learned that yes, the baby had inherited Lynch syndrome. Our daughter would face a lifetime of elevated cancer risks, requiring early and frequent screening, possible preventive surgeries, and constant vigilance. The genetics counselor explained it as calmly as possible. With proper screening and preventive care, many people with Lynch syndrome live long, healthy lives, but it will require lifelong monitoring. I watched Sarah absorb this news, saw the guilt and fear and love warring on her face, and felt an unexpected surge of protective anger. This wasn't the baby's fault. None of this was her fault. Sarah told her parents the truth on a cold Saturday afternoon. I insisted on being there, partly for support, partly to ensure she actually went through with it. Her mother cried, her father was silent and angry, and there were accusations and recriminations. But eventually, her mother put her hand on Sarah's belly and said, "That baby needs us. All of us. Whatever else happens. That baby needs her family." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Dr. Richardson died on a Tuesday morning in late November, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. Sarah got the call at work and came home early, her eyes red from crying. I held her while she sobbed for the man she'd loved in her own complicated way, the man who was our daughter's biological father, the man who would never meet the child he'd created. He wanted to live long enough to see her born, Sarah cried against my shoulder. He said maybe if he could just see her once, know she was real and healthy, but he didn't make it, and somehow that made everything more real, more final. Our daughter was born on a snowy evening in February. 22 hours of labor, with me holding Sarah's hand through every contraction, every push, every scream. When the doctor finally placed that tiny, perfect baby in Sarah's arms, I saw my wife transform. The fear and guilt faded, replaced by fierce, unconditional love. "Claire," Sarah whispered, looking down at our daughter. "We'll name her Claire. It means bright and clear. A fresh start." The nurse asked if I wanted to hold her. I hesitated. This wasn't my biological child. This was the product of my wife's affair with a dying man. But then I looked at that tiny face, those closed eyes, those perfect little fingers, and none of that mattered. I took Claire in my arms, and she was mine. Not because of biology, but because I chose her. Because sometimes love isn't about DNA or blood. It's about showing up, being present, making the choice every single day to be someone's father. "Hello, Claire," I whispered. "I'm your daddy, and I promise I'm going to be here for you, no matter what comes." 3 months later, Sarah and I sit in our living room with Claire asleep in her bassinet between us. We're both exhausted, new parents always are. But we're here. We're trying. We've been in therapy, both individual and couples, working through the trauma and betrayal and complicated grief. I don't know if our marriage will survive. Some days I look at Sarah and feel nothing but love. Other days, I can barely stand to be in the same room with her. The betrayal still fresh and burning. We're taking it one day at a time. But Claire is thriving. She'll have her first screening for Lynch syndrome-related issues when she's 2. It terrifies me and Sarah both. The knowledge that our daughter will spend her life under the shadow of potential illness. But we've connected with support groups, found excellent doctors, and made a plan. Last week, Sarah showed me a letter Richard Chun had written before he died. His attorney delivered it along with a trust fund he'd set up for Claire's medical expenses. "Dear Sarah and Mark," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know that I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on your daughter. But I'm not sorry she exists. Even though I'll never meet her, knowing she's out there, being loved and cared for by both of you, brings me peace in these final days. Mark, thank you for being a better man than I ever was. Thank you for choosing to be her father. That takes courage and love that I never possessed. Sarah, forgive yourself. You're not a bad person. You're a person who made mistakes while drowning in grief. But you're also a person capable of tremendous love. Give that love to your daughter and your husband. Take care of our girl. Make sure she knows she's loved. Make sure she grows up knowing that life is precious, even when it's complicated, even when it comes with challenges. That's all any of us can ask for. Richard. I folded the letter and handed it back to Sarah. We should keep this for Claire, I said. Someday, when she's old enough, she should know her full story. The truth, all of it. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes as always these days. All of it, she agreed. Claire stirred in her bassinet, making the little squeaking sounds that meant she'd wake soon, hungry and demanding. I reached down and picked her up, her tiny body warm and solid in my arms. Hey there, sweet girl, I murmured. Daddy's got you. And I did. I had her. Despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the genetic condition, the complicated grief and anger and fear, I had her. And she had me, because this was my daughter. Not by biology, but by choice. And that choice, that conscious decision to love and protect and raise this child, was the truest thing I'd ever done. Sarah watched us from across the room, hope and fear and love all mixed together on her face. Our marriage was still broken, still being slowly rebuilt piece by painful piece. But our family, our little girl, that was something worth fighting for. Claire opened her eyes and looked up at me, and I saw the future in her gaze. The challenges ahead, the screening appointments, the preventive care, the fear that would accompany us through her childhood and beyond. But I also saw possibility, resilience, and love. We're going to be okay, I told Sarah. Not entirely sure I believed it, but needing to say it anyway. All three of us. We're going to figure this out. And maybe we would. Or maybe we wouldn't. Maybe our marriage would end in divorce. And Sarah and I would become co-parents navigating joint custody and awkward holidays. Maybe the anger and betrayal would never fully heal. But Claire would always have a father who chose her, who loved her, who showed up every single day no matter what. And in the end, that was the only truth that really mattered. The tragedy wasn't the affair or the lies or even the genetic condition. The tragedy was that it took all of this, the betrayal and the dying man and the terrified confessions, for me to understand what really mattered. Love isn't about perfect circumstances or biological certainty. Love is about choice, commitment, and showing up even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I looked at Claire, this perfect little person who carried both hope and challenge in her DNA, and made the choice again. The same choice I'd make every day for the rest of my life. Welcome to the world, Claire, I whispered. Your story is complicated, but you're loved, always loved. And that's the truth that matters most.